So I just wanted to really welcome everybody here to Black All Year. I'll introduce myself. I'm Steph Edusei and I'm the creator of Black All Year, which is here to remind everybody that Black issues and challenges, our achievements and experiences happen all year round and not just in Black History Month. If you missed previous events, they are available on YouTube and as a podcast. And if you are watching or listening after the event, please like and subscribe, as it makes sure that you don't miss any future material and it helps others to find our content. So I'm really, really pleased to be able to welcome Anita Powell today. Anita is employed as a community engagement advocate. She's volunteered and worked and done activism covering social inequality, heritage and menopause. She had a natural interest in social issues and injustices. And besides working on and with mental health, ex-offenders, unemployment, menopause and refugee issues, she's also worked with women, men and young people. Now, Anita has been a menopause activist since 2019 when she founded the Menopause Alliance, which holds face-to-face peer support group in her hometown of Bedford. So a little bit further away from me than I'd like, but never mind. In 2020, she became co-founder of Black Women in Menopause, which offers face-to-face online events via Zoom every 2 months. And Anita is also a speaker on community, ethnic minorities and women's issues and has been on BBC Breakfast, in The Guardian, on Magic FM radio, in Marie Claire magazine, Stylist and much more. So welcome, Anita. I'd been trying to do this subject for quite some time, so I was really delighted when you agreed to be our guest.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for the introduction, by the way.
I was going to say, it's quite daunting, isn't it, when somebody introduces you like that? It's like, oh, okay.
I was thinking, who's she? I got to meet her.
So, Anita, I'm really interested into kind of you and why talking and highlighting menopause issues has become such a priority for you, because I suspect it hasn't been your lifelong mission.
No, it hasn't. No. I think for me, it's kind of connected to the issues around women, older women. Once I was, I haven't always been an older woman, and I was a younger woman once. I didn't fully understand how invisible and how devalued women as a whole are once they hit a certain age. And once I was nearing that age, I noticed the impact it was having, not only to myself, to my peers, but also my workspace. So I had to provide community support to older women. And it's not just about going back into the workforce after being out of work for a long time. Other conversations were arising as part of my support, and I didn't quite understand how to support. And that's when I woke up one day to the words of perimenopause, and I said, "What's that?" So I went to a TED talk. They were talking about fertility and the importance of knowing menopause. Your mother and your grandmothers, when they started their menopause, because it's an indicator of your inherited kind of time you might start the menopause. And I thought, oh, so it's really quite important then. And part of our infertility issue we have in this country is also connected to women not understanding when their menopause is due to start. So I did some research, and that's when I was enlightened, and that was the beginning of where I am now.
Right. And I've been listening to a few of your podcast episodes, and to be honest with you, that was the first time I'd heard that about looking at when your mother and grandmother started the menopause, because it was, it's not something that I was aware of. And for a lot of us, we may know when our mother went through the menopause, but it's probably quite unlikely that our grandmother even would discuss it.
Mm. Definitely. It's with regards to, I found in the conversations I had, it's not a generational discussion, even though it needs to be. I'm presuming in past times, women did talk about things but socially we interacted with each other a lot differently with regards to the elders and whatever. And I've done some research with different communities, and I've discovered that sometimes menstrual topics of all kinds, whether it's periods with younger girls or whether it's the menopause with older women, in certain communities in Africa, they do have, they don't use the word menopause, because that's very much sometimes a Western word, but they have discussions around that kind of change. But now in 2023, England, if you can't say the word menopause, it's not discussed.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned periods. I saw a post on LinkedIn about periods and about the shame that still is there with periods. And I still, to this day, if I'm going to the toilet and need to change a tampon or whatever, I still kind of try to hide it up my sleeve a little bit, because it's like, and I feel like I should be walking down the corridor waving it like, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just on my period. But yeah, there's still that thing. And do you find as well with menopause that it's a very negative thing when it is discussed? So I'll give an example. One of the things that I hate is the 7 dwarfs of the menopause. You've seen that one. So there's like grumpy, itchy, sweaty and things like that. Because I think actually that's really negative. And actually, I'm not saying positive. I'm not one of these people that says, have a happy period type thing. I'm not saying that the menopause necessarily is a positive experience, but it's actually, it just makes that even worse. I think some of the language that we use around some of the symptoms of menopause.
Sorry. I would definitely say that the conversation around menopause is very negative. And even we're going through a really positive stage with regards to conversation, because more women are talking about it. But also at the same time, some women are experiencing a reaction to the increased conversation about menopause. So some women are still being hit with it, because now it's easier for a manager or easier for someone to say, "Oh, you're working like this because you're menopausal." So we're hit if we don't talk about it, and for some women we're hit with this stick called menopause if we do talk about it. There's a lot of negativity around it. It just needs to be, the narrative needs to change in similarity to pregnancy. That's how I view it. It's just something that women go through, and you have to understand it to effectively manage it. And you come out the other end with not having to deal with that monthly mess. It's just a stage of our life. But we need to be respected and valued, and we need to get basic optimum care through our health services, so that we can, the third trimester, whatever you wish to call it, is a healthy one, it's a positive one, and not decades of misery.
So let's talk a little bit about health. And I think one of the things that, if you do look at a lot of the conversation around menopause, that does tend to be led by white women. There is a lot about how difficult it is to access any kind of care or support relating to menopause at all. And has that been your experience personally and with the groups that you've worked with?
I mean, first of all, I have to say that I'm a community worker, and the majority of the people I interact with are people who are struggling. So I have to say, and the reason why I have to say that is because I have come across some Black women who economically are very comfortable. They, as soon as there's a sign, they can go to a private doctor, and I haven't had the same dialogue with them. But I'm not saying it's loads, but, if you can pay a private doctor to look at you, you can get what you want. So I have to say that. So I don't want to presume that I can't speak on behalf of their struggle. That's really what I want to say. And I think that money can make a difference with regards to your menopause outcome, no matter what ethnicity you are. But the people I work with, menopause is an absolute struggle and a pain, because one, there are other things that people I work with, they're disadvantaged. They experience a lack of opportunity. They live in a world where they have to rely on social institutions, social services, social setups sometimes, and they're just not valued. They're literally an account number. So if you can't get housing, effectively, if you can't access proper education for your child. If no one listens to you for anything, going to your GP is no different. And it's just another layer of distress and discomfort, which will ultimately have an impact on you emotionally and your anxiety levels, even if you don't have medical symptoms.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting what you say there about, obviously not all Black women are disadvantaged. I suspect I would have a very different experience to some of the women that you're working with and some of the women that I do in other roles. But actually, if you are Black, and particularly if you're Black and female, you are more likely to be sitting within that disadvantaged pot. And it was a really interesting point that you made on one of the podcasts around that. So one of the things I've read, and I was really reluctant to put this out when I was publishing and kind of advertising this event, is that Black women tend to enter the menopause earlier than white women. And the reason I was really reluctant is I've seen lots of statistics on what Black people have from a health perspective, that when you actually look at it in detail, what you find is that it's got more to do with social deprivation and other inequities than it has actually to do with biology. So that discussion that you had around menopause and about the age of menopause, it'd be great to kind of explore that a little bit and some of the things that you feel might be impacting on that earlier experience of menopause for Black women.
I mean, first of all, I also have to say I'm not a medical person. I'm not a scientific person. So I have to go on the research that I've seen. And the research that I've seen, first of all, doesn't, I mean, there's something called the SWAN research, and there's other research out there which clearly does state that brown and Black women go through menopause earlier. And I'm not going to say that they're incorrect or whatever. I just know that the sample group sometimes is just, for me, it's not large enough. And sometimes people have to remember, if you look at the world has more brown and Black women than white women. I know economically we don't hold the purse strings, and that's what influences all science and medical research. But that exclusion within that research area could potentially have a major impact on the Black community, because we know that Black people experience diabetes more. We know that Black women go through fibroids more. So there are differences, but we're not really researched enough at a basic level to understand what the differences are. So I'd like to say that first. But with regards to my experience as a community worker, and also looking at what happened with COVID, economic disadvantage, social disadvantage with regards to the quality of your housing, even your relationship status. I mean, there are loads of, I know feminists don't like to talk about this, but there are loads of feminists who benefit from white male privilege because they share a bedroom with one. you know, I've never shared a bedroom with one. So I will never benefit. So there's loads of things where we are disadvantaged, or women of colour are disadvantaged, or don't. Sometimes I feel uncomfortable using the word disadvantage. We don't have the benefit of advantage. Yeah. So we don't get that opportunity to benefit from certain things. So I'm not saying that if you're white and you're female and you've gone to university and you happen to be married to someone who's successful and whatever, that means that your life is full of roses and you can skip everywhere and dance. I'm just saying that I'm not given the opportunities that maybe you were given, and therefore I can put 100% into every day of my life, and I will still never be as high up as the ladder as you are. That's what the experience of being Black is. And with regards to menopause and health, you see the same thing. Social deprivation, economic deprivation for anyone is a disadvantage. It literally, we know that mental health and financial inequality go hand in hand. We know that poor housing has a major knock-on effect on the quality of your life. All kinds of stats come in. If you take out ethnicity, they still have an impact on your quality of life. When you're a person of colour, the chances of experiencing all these things increase. And therefore, anything you experience, which is negative or distressful, is amplified. And that's what I find definitely has an impact on all diverse groups. So it's not just about Black women, it's brown women, it's people with disabilities. All these things are amplified because we already have so many layers of things which are having a knock-on effect and knocking us down. Yeah. That's really what. Yeah.
And there's quite an interesting storm going on in some parts of kind of social media at the minute, where an equality, diversity and inclusion expert said, EDI is not just about race, and it's triggered quite a storm. And what people are saying is, you're absolutely right, it's not just about race, but the reason that we have to make it about race is because no matter what the subject is, race is always at the bottom. So it's that thing of, actually, it may be about disability, but actually the people who have the worst experiences of living in a discriminatory world are the Black and brown people who are disabled. When you're talking about gender, the worst people who have that experience of a sexist world are Black and brown women. So it's always, when you look at the kind of hierarchy right at the bottom, race is where it comes into. So actually, if you make it about race, you improve the lot for everybody. So as you say, there's that thing of, you're more likely to be in this deprived grouping if you are Black or brown, but also then your experience of being deprived or not having that privilege is likely to be worse because you're Black or brown. So yeah, I think it's really interesting how that can kind of skew things a little bit when we're looking at research. And I find it quite amazing. There's actually much research being done anyway, because there's generally not a lot of research into things that involves women. So the fact that there's actually been anything that touches on experiences of Black and brown women is quite impressive. So what type of thing might a Black woman find is different to the experiences of their white counterparts when it comes to menopause?
I mean, it's not. I think it's a combination. For me, I talk about menopause in different spaces. So my group, Menopause Alliance, started in 2019. Even though it was led by me, a community worker who traditionally works with disadvantaged communities, a Black woman, working class woman, I had a few conferences in 2019, and 99% of them was attended by white middle class women. There was no engagement from women who look like me and sound like me in this space, even though they know of me. And if I'd done a topic on Black heritage, it wouldn't have been the same. So there's a greater reluctancy to engage in that conversation. And I think I know I was talking to somebody a few months ago, a woman who runs a project for first generation African women. And she said to me, in Africa, we don't suffer from menopause. It's a Western problem. And that's internalizing the fact that we don't suffer. So we do experience disadvantage, and we internalize it, and it stops us from sometimes engaging in this dialogue of looking after us, because that's what it is. It's about looking after ourselves. And this experience of menopause for us, it's been given to us within our own communities, because, for example, this one runs a group to help women, first generation African women within the area that I live in. And I was trying to get her to engage in the conversation, and her response was, no, we don't need to, because we're African women, we don't suffer. So she was a barrier to those women being informed. Also, the experiences that women have with regards to menopause, people just don't really take us seriously sometimes. So I know I have a friend who's white, middle class, highly educated, and I know if she went to a doctor and she complained about anxiety or anger issues, she'd be taken more seriously than me. I know she would, because she'd be seen as someone who's educated and informed. I would be seen as an angry Black woman. I'll be blunt. Yeah, she would be seen as an educated woman who's having a difficulty. So that's like another experience that your doctor might come out and say something, but you're strong. You could deal with it. Or like, it's not an anxiety issue. It's just she's black. She's just angry, you know. So that's like an experience that may happen. With regards to everyday life, I think people this persona of being strong black woman is a barrier when you need help. It comes from a place of need. I think black women, from the day we're born, we understand, not understand is the wrong word, we experience devaluing. Because when I talk about racism in the world that I live in, I understand that it's not just about blatant, straightforward hate. It's also about people who look like me and sound like me. Sometimes they just have less value. So I can come across someone who doesn't have a problem living in a country with brown and black people. They've got a friend who's black and brown. You know, the person who washes their car or doesn't work as a takeaway is black and brown. But they don't value them. They wouldn't want their daughter or son to bring home a black and brown person. They wouldn't want their boss who earns more than them to be black or brown because they don't value them equally. That's what it comes down to. So they might not realize that they have bias and they devalue people who look a certain way based on their color. And I think that when you're a woman of color and you're struggling, you have this barrier of which sometimes you internalize because we're strong, we don't need help. I'm going to get through this by myself. And that's an internal barrier and the external barrier. And then you have a lifetime. It's a lifetime. It's not just about menopause. It's a lifetime of being devalued. And I think that causes a major impact on the mental health of black women. And sometimes when they hit menopausal age, it can create a meltdown, a mental health meltdown.
Yeah, and Lou's made a really interesting comment in the chat. Lou, I don't know if you want to come on and kind of talk a little bit about what you said.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so it's my latest obsession. So I'm an EDI manager in a health research organisation. My background's higher education, so I'm quite academic in my approach. And there's somebody called Miranda Fricker who's written a lot about epistemic injustice, and that's injustice or unfairness in our capacity as knowers. So what I know as a woman is somehow less valid than what a man knows. And within that, she talks about testimonial injustice. And testimonial injustice is kind of how valid our testimonies of our experiences are treated. And you see, like, women in healthcare, you know, it's a huge issue for menopause, maternity. But what you're saying basically for black women and brown women in health, trying to access healthcare, we're just not trusted. We as a white woman, but as women, we're not trusted in our testimonies of our own experiences and as experts in our own bodies. And as you know, as you said, Anita, as a black woman, the angry black woman trope is just far too easy to trot out, when actually, you know, mood variations in menopause is a really common issue. Yes, it's just really it's worth, it's on Wikipedia, you don't have to read the book, it's very long, but well worth looking up on YouTube or Wikipedia.
Thank you, Lou. That's really useful. And I think yeah, that there is that thing about being less valuable. And Golsey, did you want to come on as well?
I was just agreeing with what was being said. I haven't heard the term testimonial injustice before, so that's a really, really good way of looking at it. It occurs not just in health, it occurs in criminal justice. It occurs in everything where the fact that you're saying it means it's somehow not credible. People don't believe it. And then, I mean, we experience this as women generally when you might be in a meeting, make a point, nobody says anything. And then a man makes the same point 5 minutes later, and he's applauded and sort of, you know, hoisted high and awarded a crown for making the same point. And the same thing also happens with race. When as a black woman, you're seen as what you're saying is not worthwhile, it's not to be believed, it's not to be taken seriously. And I think it very much plays into the rhetoric around menopause. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kathy said, and then you add age in, which is obviously something that tends to be an issue in menopause. So you're not just a woman, you're not just a Black woman, you're an older Black woman, and therefore you don't have a clue what you're talking about. And I think one of the things that I found really interesting about what you were saying, and again was on your podcast, Anita, was about that strong Black woman. And I have real problems with that, because I think you're absolutely right. We have to become strong as Black women, but it's also something I think that is put on us. So people assume that we are strong because we're Black. And it's one of the few things that's said in a positive light about Black women is, oh, Black women are really strong. So then how do you find when people have this perception of Black women as being strong, angry, but strong, we then take that mantle on ourselves and say we have to be strong. How does that impact on us when we're then maybe struggling through the menopause?
It has an impact on many things. So one of the things it has, I think, an impact on is our ability to trust our space, to trust the people around us, to trust the doctor, to trust our work colleagues. I feel that being this burden of being told that you're independent, strong, and you can do whatever you need to do, but at the same time, we're not valued. So in a sense, we are told that we're basically a servant. Well, we've got all the duties of the house, but we don't live in a nice bedroom, of the house. I think that has a major impact on our mental health. I think it has an impact in us being the best that we can be. I think that we continually, women of colour continually struggle on a day-to-day basis a lot with their mental health. But at the same time, the mental health services at basic level doesn't meet our needs, because a lot of the counsellors and people out there are not competent in dialogue around race. So even if you do engage in professional mental health and you wait wait a few months or 6 weeks or whatever, and the doctor agrees for you to see a therapist that you have no choice over, you go and see them, and there's somebody who doesn't understand your female race narrative. You're basically wasting 6 weeks of your life sitting talking to someone who lives comfortably and doesn't understand that sometimes the underlying issue with regards to your experience is related to your race, not just your age and your gender. It's also related to your race. And then menopause comes along, and as a community, we don't talk about it. So therefore, there's a lack of education around the conversation of menopause. As a community, Black women are the foundation, I find, in most Black spaces. We are key with regards, women generally are key. I'm being sexist. We are key. We are the nurturers of great men. Yeah. They wouldn't be there if we didn't basically support them. Yeah. So Black women are nurturers, with regards to their community, but we're not nurtured at all. I think the level of nurturing within our community and externally from the wider community is low. And I think that's just a massive burden which amplifies disadvantage. So it amplifies the menopause experience with suffering, mental health, and just the whole discomfort of it. And also, as I said, trust, I think, is a major thing. I think a lot of Black women just don't trust, because we're continually devalued as women. We're devalued because we're Black. And then we have these kind of these labels that we're strong and that we're angry and all these things which make us think it's actually best just to be quiet now and struggle quietly. And I think it's just hard.
Yeah. And I think there is that thing of asking for help when your value and the only real value that you have is rooted in you being strong is really, really challenging, isn't it? Saying, I'm not coping when the only time you've had any kind of real value has been in your strength, that's very challenging. And then if you add in that the community around you are saying, oh, well, in Africa, we don't do menopause, it becomes a really challenging situation for Black women to be able to deal with and to get that help and support when they need it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what kind of, from your experience, and say you've there's personal experience, but also the experience of the groups that you've been working with, what advice, first of all, could you give to individuals who are starting to experience the menopause and really just want some help, support, guidance, that type of thing? And then something for you to think about is, one of the things that I really want people to think about is from an employment position. There will be people who listen and watch this who are not Black women, and actually what should they be thinking about? What's the difference between all the stuff that they're maybe hearing about menopause generally and menopause with Black women? But let's start off with the women who are experiencing it themselves. What kind of advice would you give? What kind of support would you suggest that people look for?
I think it's understanding, first of all, that you're on a journey. Yeah. And I suppose you need to go and get a ticket for the journey, because you can't just jump into it. You've got to get a ticket. And the best way to get a ticket is to find a way to educate yourself. Unfortunately, the services out there are so poor that women who are informed get better service. And that's why generally women who are university educated are more likely to get a better response from their GP than someone who doesn't have a GCSE. Yeah. So being informed and educated on basic things around the menopause is essential. So you could do it either by reading books, podcasts, or you could find a face-to-face community or an online community. And you just find one that fits in with you as an individual. That's what I would say. And the education you gain from that space is good because everyone has a different experience of menopause. And it could be by hearing somebody else's experience, it educates you to be a good ally to another woman. Because I know I've done some talks recently where I've had people talk about the experience of cancer and going into menopause. And even though they haven't experienced menopause after cancer, if they do come across someone who does, they should really empathise with them a bit more and understand them and help fellow women through that journey. That's my aim. But so peer education in certain groups would be a great way to inform yourself, as well as being a great person to support other women.
And what about when you're dealing with healthcare professionals? So we've talked about some of the issues that people might have. Have you found anything that helps kind of unlock those doors and get some real support from healthcare professionals? Being
informed. I mean, the things I struggle in getting through to my GP with regards to menopause, my GP doesn't take it seriously. And I also still kind of question whether my GP just wants to classify all menopausal women as having mental health issues, because it just fits in with their agenda and stuff, and it's just easier for them to process. So I think being informed and turning up to the table and say, I want this and I want that. Unfortunately, from what I hear all round, it's the better approach. And also it could be you talk to other women and you find a GP surgery or health service that's empathetic to menopause, and you change. I mean, I know loads of women who've they've been with their GP for 10 years, 15 years. They're going through the menopause. They're not very good. They go and meet someone, says, oh, try Dr. So-and-so at that surgery. And within a few weeks, they've changed and they're happy.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really good advice, because we tend to think, particularly in the UK, because the NHS is free at the point of access, that we have to stick with what we've got. And actually, if it's not serving you well, change to somewhere where it will, particularly with general practice. There is that option to move to somewhere else. You don't just have to put up with things. And that that thing about peer support, I think that's one of the reasons why I was keen to do this. It's not something I'm experiencing yet, but it's on the horizon. I'm fairly certain about that. The more that I think I can talk about menopause means the more other people can talk about it, and actually I can learn about it as well and get myself prepared. So I think that whole thing, I think we need to, within our communities, unlock that kind of taboo of talking about it. We should be saying, you know what, if we didn't have menopause, it's a natural part of being able to bear children. It happens at some point. So we have to just accept it in the same way that we would accept any other condition that people go through. And we don't know how long it's going to last, but it will come to an end at some point. I've been assured by people. it does come to an end at some point. So then, about employers, anything that you can think of there that actually employers maybe need to be particularly aware of if they have Black women who are perimenopausal, menopausal?
I think this is quite a hard one because I've never been in a position of as an employer. I'm that noisy person that says, "Give me rights. I want this. I want that. I don't care about your profit and loss."
So, as an employee, what do you want from your employer then? As an employee,
a safe space to talk, and when I mean a safe space to talk, talking about the symptoms of peri or menopause is very private. If you get a period that lasts for 30 days. And it's having an impact in your ability to go to work, it's really hard to tell your male 50-year-old boss, I can't go to work, I'm constantly bleeding and I'm tired because clearly I've got low iron. It's really hard. So you need that space where you need to be able to talk to someone, and because you have to sometimes be quite descriptive, because menopause is not a protected character, so you have to actually state what's wrong with you. So that is needed in all scenarios. I think with regards to Black women and menopause, I think it's just being more conscious of the fact that some Black women don't have certain opportunities or securities or support structures that others do. And therefore going through something which can have an impact on your mental health. And it can have a direct impact because the hormones change, and it could have experience impact on your mental health because you're stressed. You need to have a boss who's compassionate enough to understand, Anita, I get you. You just need some time, as well as listening to the symptoms. And I think that women from diverse communities, they need to have extra empathy in understanding that they might not have support structures that will help alleviate some of the mental health issues you have associated with any health condition. Yes, if that helps.
Yeah, and I suppose it's listening to you, there's something about that. I'll use the term cultural competence that actually needs to be applied in everything when you're dealing with people of colour. That understanding that the norm and the default in this country, in the Western world, is white, and there. But if you are not the default, then that brings with it other complications and other experiences that may not be directly related to the issue you're talking about, but will be affecting that individual. So, as you said, the whole thing of actually, it's not about the fact that it's that I can't get HRT. It's the fact that actually, because I'm a Black woman, I'm less likely to be believed, that my testimony is less likely to be believed, and therefore it is harder for me to do some of this stuff. And that general understanding of the context in which we sit sometimes I find a bit lacking from employers. It's that well, everybody has that, so why is that an issue? Why is it different for you if you don't then understand that wider cultural life that we sit in? I mean, you'll probably have similar experiences to me, that actually I'm Black every single day, and people interact with me as a Black woman every single day. And some of that is positive and some of it's negative. But the burden of knowing that I may have negative interactions purely and simply because of the melanin in my skin brings a burden that I carry with me every single day.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's that type of thing. I don't know if anybody's got any questions or anything that they would like to pose, or comments that you'd like to give, but please just kind of, join in if you'd like to have that discussion. Anita, I know that you've said in the introduction, you have been quite successful in kind of getting out there and getting seen, being on BBC News and stuff like that. But one of the big issues is that the people who talk about menopause in the West are white women. And again, why do you think that is? Is that partially our reluctance to talk about it? Really curious as to that.
Also, I'd like to also say as well, it's not just white women, it's white middle class women. Because I work in a space where there's white working class women and the dialogue is not as great. There's still taboos that are actually not identical, but very similar as in Black spaces, sometimes in white working class spaces. And sometimes because I'm conscious sometimes that I think for my client base, sometimes the barrier, they have multiple barriers and sometimes it's class. If you can't, in certain spaces, if a white working class person can't fit in, a Black working class person, chances are they will never fit in because they've got two sticks hitting them, not just one. And I feel that the conversation around menopause is predominantly white, middle class, university educated, and it's very much, I'm not necessarily using the correct word, it has a strong association with feminism, and I'm a feminist, so I'm not saying that in a negative perspective, but it's kind of fitted in with this kind of feminist powerhouse, powerful white educated women. We're doing it for ourselves. We're going to change things, and I found as an activist within this space for 4 years, sometimes I've turned up to spaces and I'm pushed out because I don't fit in with those narratives. So I've had to go in like a bulldog, to be blunt, to say I have value. So it's not just about certain women talking about it. Some of them only want certain women to talk about it. And they don't want it to be diverse, or they don't feel it's relevant to bring diverse dialogue into the conversation of menopause. So it's... So have I answered your question? I don't know.
Yeah, partially. And Anne-Marie, you've popped something in the chat. I don't know if you want to come on and ask that question, or if you want me to read it out. If you want to come on, you can just unmute. Okay, I'll take it that. So Anne-Marie's asked, how can we move forward in a more positive fashion in relation to menopause and Black women?
I think it's about being inclusive, full stop. I think the barriers that affect Black women, even though we have characteristics which have an impact on us, I sometimes feel that the space has closed ears. And I think sometimes the people who are leading the conversation are not experts on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They are experts on themselves. So if they're career driven, if they're, famous, it's all about me people, they'll talk about menopause from their perspective. And when they go to see Parliament or when they're being interviewed by newspapers, they don't talk about the other diverse groups because they don't really care about them. They're not an inclusive person. They're about me people. So I feel that sometimes we need to have speakers who are activists who understand the need for inclusion in the conversation, because loads of changes are happening. And loads of celebrities are in the space and things like that, but they don't know about inclusion. They know nothing about it. So some of the things that they're asking for are not beneficial to the people who need it the most, because they actually don't know what these people need. It's like we need to have conversations a bit more about basic healthcare. So it's important to talk about the workspace, but that's been heavily driven by career women.
Mm-hmm.
If it was driven by community workers, it would be more focused on the National Health Service providing basic care so that women who can't afford to go to a private doctor, who just work at Tesco's, then their priority they do need priority with regards to their job, but they're not career driven. They just need to sort out why their knees ache when they're stacking a lower shelf. And they need to know that when they go to the doctor, they'll give them the right prescription that will help them sleep at night. They don't necessarily need to know how to get into the boardroom. And I think that has to change. The people speaking about it have to be more educated and informed on the diversity of women. And therefore, the strategies that need to be put in place will include all different types of women, not just women of colour, women with disadvantage or disability and whatever. And we have a lack of those speakers talking about menopause.
Yeah. So there's something there really about a call to ourselves, isn't there, to say that actually we need to be getting out there and talking more, and we need to be supporting. So one of the things that I talk about quite often is that my role is to amplify voices. It's not necessarily to be the voice. So it's about really encouraging and supporting others who've got those experiences to be able to shout and to be heard. And if they're not, that's when I step in with the privilege that I have to be able to say, this person's saying something, have you heard it? And it sounds like it's that type of thing that you're talking about is about, we need to be hearing from not just those very educated, middle class, predominantly white women. And
you can afford private healthcare.
Yeah.
So
therefore they're placing less you're from the southeast, Anita, because none of us can do that up here. It's like, forget that.
But within the town that because I've done menopause stuff for like 4 years in the town that I live in, I've seen a massive change with regards to the menopause dialogue in my town. So when I first started, there weren't many private services and whatever. The National Health Service, we're lucky in this town, we do actually have a menopause clinic. So I know that we're lucky in the town, but the private menopause doctors who cover menopause, they've literally multiplied like bunny rabbits, literally left, right and centre. So if you can afford private healthcare and you live in my town, the quality of healthcare you've received in regards to menopause is amazing. If you are, Joe Bloggs, it's hardly moved because there's a reluctance from the GPs within my town, because I presume it has an impact on their training and how much money they receive and all that kinds of things. So private healthcare, the option of private healthcare for some people is great, but at the same time, not focusing on National Health Service healthcare is affecting basic women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you say, it's that when it's affecting your everyday woman, it's then affecting on their employment, it's affecting on their families mental well-being and physical well-being. So the impact then on society is huge. But actually what it sounds like you're saying is there's a small group of women who are getting some very good treatment because they can afford to pay for it, which really goes against the reason the NHS was set up in the first place. So it's really, I was going to say disheartening, disappointing certainly, that's the kind of situation that we're getting into around certain conditions like menopause, that it very much is that you have such a different experience if you've got the money to pay for it, which will disproportionately affect your educated white middle class. So, yeah. Oh, right. I feel a bit depressed now. Thanks for that, Anita. I don't know. We've got a couple of minutes left. So if anybody has anything else that they'd like to comment or to ask, please do. So you've been in this kind of sphere for 4 years now, so you've probably acquired quite a lot of knowledge and experience. And as you say, you're not a healthcare professional. What are the things that most commonly people don't realize might be menopause, but actually are menopause related, because we all know about the hot flushes, and actually I think most people know about sleeplessness now, but what are some of the other things that you've come across that actually could well be menopause related, but some of us may just dismiss it as we're getting old, or we're going a bit mad or whatever?
Itchy skin. I don't experience it, but sometimes the women that come in, they're like, ooh, ooh. I mean, they sometimes itch each other. It's just they scratch each other. It's quite weird. So itchy skin. I don't know if it's old age or whether it's menopause related, because I'm not a medical professional, but dry eyes. Very often, a lot of women, I mean, at one time, because for my sessions, sometimes I do show and tell. And show and tell, the women have to come in with what they use to help manage their menopause and midlife. Yeah. So very often they come in and they've got dry eyes, solution to help with dry eyes. They talk about moisturizers to relieve the itchy skin. What else do they talk? Well, they talk about all kinds of things, really. I mean, someone was talking about dead leg at the last session, which I'm not quite sure what exactly that was. I don't know if it's old age or whether it's related to something else.
One of the things that you touched on actually was joint pain. Now, I know somebody who has joint pain, assumed they were having arthritis, and then somebody said to them, she happens to be a black woman, but somebody had said to her, that might be menopause, and she's now on HRT and her joint pain's almost disappeared.
Yes, yeah, that's everyone there literally comes in with joint pain. One thing I would also mention, which came out at Christmas, at our Christmas menopause meetup, my group in Bedford, it's mixed. So we have white, Asian and black. And over Christmas, we were talking about diabetes and pre-diabetes. And it turned out that out of eight women from diverse communities, brown and black, 6 were either pre-diabetic, diabetic, or once pre-diabetic. 6 out of the 8.
Wow.
And hardly, I think we only had 1 out of 5 Caucasian women who were in that diabetes bracket. So the ratio with the diabetes, I don't know if it's a fluke or whether actually that is representative of diabetes in menopausal women and diverse communities. Worldwide. I don't know, but only till we spoke about it did we understand that it's affecting us all. It's affecting most of the women who are brown and black.
Yeah, and that might be something to do with that higher instance of diabetes within those populations, which again, I mean, I used to work in the health service, not clinical, but I was always told that was to do with our genetics, but actually has very little to do with, if anything, to do with genetics, and is about socioeconomic situations and cultural differences and that type of thing. But yeah, if there is a link with menopause, there won't be any research into it, I'm almost certain, for the reasons I said before. But Lou's actually popped in things like recurrent urinary tract infections, migraines, which is interesting. I had one this morning. That might be a trigger. Extreme fatigue. And yeah, that a lot of women are misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression or with chronic fatigue. And I think, again, particularly with Black and brown women, that depression label is put on us very quickly, that the issues we're having must be because of depression and not because of other things. So it's interesting that comes up. So I had a question just started on HRT. How long should you expect to be on it? So I don't know if you can kind of, just from your experience, Anita.
From what I understand, there is no fixed time period. I know some people who are on it for ages. You just have to go to the doctor, and then after a certain period of time, the doctor reviews it. So they might change your medication or take you off. Sometimes you won't realise that you won't need it until you come off it, because HRT just slows down the change. Some I've heard, I'm not a medical profession, that some people have stayed on it for decades. So more than 10 years. So, and they've gone through the menopause. They've gone through that single day where, 12 months after their last period. They've come off it. Because I know somebody whose aunt the doctor took them off after 10 years, because at one point you weren't supposed to be on it for more than 10 years.
There was that link with breast cancer, wasn't there, which is kind of scared a lot of people off.
Yeah. Since she came off it, even though her period had stopped ages ago, loads of symptoms came back and she went back on it. But for her to go back, because I spoke to this woman, she said, my aunt's stressed because the doctor said she can't go back on it. It's been 10 years. What should she do? And I said, go and get a second opinion. She went to a different doctor, got a second opinion. She went back on it. All the symptoms that she was suffering went away. So now she's just going to stay on it as long as she can. And occasionally, under the doctor's guidance, come off it to see if she has these symptoms come back. And if it doesn't, then she won't start HRT again. But for that woman, it's trial and error.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to draw this to an end. I'm sure we could kind of sit and have a chat about this all afternoon. But thank you so much, Anita. It's been really useful just kind of opening that window a little bit into kind of menopause, and particularly Black experiences of menopause. And before we go, I just wanted to mention that we do have our next event planned. It's on Tuesday, the 25th of April. It's going to be a little bit different. We're going to do Black All Year anti-racist discussions, and we're going to use something called the anti-racist deck, which is something that is prepared by Ibram X. Kendi and has kind of conversation starters in it. And what I'm hoping is that we'll have a panel and we'll get a good discussion going amongst the panel, but also with other participants. So if you're interested in being on the panel, I'd really like a mixed mixed panel. Please email me on blackallyearuk@outlook.com. The booking is actually live on Eventbrite now, so you'll be able to book that as well, and I'll pop that into the comments and into the stuff that I pop online. So it would be really, really great. Thank you, Val's already got a ticket. Fantastic. But yeah, if you are interested in being on that panel, it would be great. I've already done a session for podcast only using those cards, and it was a really kind of thought-provoking and at times emotional conversation. But Anita, thank you again so much. It really has been fantastic. And thank you to everybody who's joined and inputted today. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks.